Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. Are we streaming? Yes, I think we're streaming. Hi, my name is Flynn, and I'm very happy to be hosting today. This is one of our last streams for the year, believe it or not, but it's actually the 20th of November, 35 days until Christmas if you live here, 36 if you're in the States. Here's Jeremy Lord. Hi, Jeremy. Have you done all of your Christmas shopping?
No, I have
Yeah.
not. I have not even thought about my Christmas shopping, and thank you for adding
Yep.
some stress for me for my day.
Just
Thank you very
ruin
much.
the end of your
Appreciate
week,
it.
my friend. Yeah, I haven't started either, if it makes you feel any better. May have bought some Lego from a secondhand store to go with
Nice.
the kids. But
Yeah.
we digress. This is part two of a two-part stream. Totally different stream. So if you missed yesterday, doesn't matter. Jeremy is about to give us a really quick little recap of what we did. You can go watch the full thing later. But it does kind of tie itself well into this stream. We're live on YouTube. So if you've got any questions as we're going along, please don't hesitate to throw them in chat. Jeremy, would you like to do a bit of a recap on what we did yesterday?
Very much so. Yeah. So we're doing something a little bit different today. Usually you get to see me and my desktop. Today you're literally seeing the top of my desk and an iPad on it. So we are jumping into Adobe Fresco today.
Yay.
But yesterday we also did something a little bit different. We spoke a little bit about the potential of Firefly boards in Adobe Firefly, and how to use that tool, not necessarily to kind of like jump in and generate some AI content and images, but to do that hand in hand with a creative process. So we kind of generated this board, which I shared with Flynn, and we kind of like updating it live together on the stream, looking at some inspiration, using obviously Firefly, which is hooked up with Firefly and a few other partner models like Google's Nano Banana or Flux, Content Flux, to generate some images, get some inspiration going, get some reference potentially also going, and just talked a little bit about kind of some of the different tools and options that you can do with Firefly, but mostly touching upon this idea of like, how does this incorporate into my creative process? And it effectively kind of at the end kind of result is it gets rid of this idea of like having massive email chains with clients, where stuff kind of gets lost, and maybe, you know, once you get sort of super deep in the email chain, it's hard to kind of do a little bit of version control. And so this kind of centralizes everything into that. So it's a really cool thing, and I'm looking forward to kind of exploring it a little bit more and definitely incorporating it into my process. But having said all that, we also kind of doing this for the purpose of making an illustration. So we kind of put together this brief. As you said, it's almost Christmas. And as far as like all retail and shops have been concerned, it's been Christmas for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
Which is incredible, and a little bit frustrating when it's like start of November and you're already hearing all the kind of like Christmas carols and songs and Christmas decorations are going up in all the shops and everything. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
give us a break. So I thought I would do basically kind of like a t-shirt design that we will get screen printed in limited colors, and creatively speaking, something that's like a little bit like, I guess if you want to be a little bit cynical, it's like the horror of Christmas returning again. It's like that time of the year, which is a nice time of the year, but it's also kind of like, oh no, it's Christmas again. And all your friends ask you if you've done your Christmas shopping. Um,
Sorry about
so yeah.
that.
So we ended up with this kind of series of sketches that we popped into here. We kind of spoke a little bit about how this kind of goes back and forth with Photoshop as well, so you can make some edits on the fly. And then because of all this is live, when I then jump into Fresco, you get all of those kind of things as part of your Creative Cloud. So they're all kind of living in Creative Cloud, where you can see some of the things that are kind of generated in here, like this little kind of skeleton gingerbread man is living in there. And this concepts as well, which is what I will be working on today, also lives inside of this Creative Cloud. So these are the concepts that I had kind of imported straight from Firefly, taken them, they're already preloaded into my document here. So I don't have to actually open anything in there, just like ready to go. So I've selected this sketch. to work on it. It's just, I kind of like this idea of like Christmas, the return, kind of like zombie gingerbread man crawling out of the
Yeah.
grave to come and, you know, make you do some Christmas shopping and eat lots and lots of food. So we're going to work on this one. But one of the things that's really cool with Fresco, and usually when I've kind of done this in the past, I've really had to kind of work my traditional kind of setup, I guess I should say, whenever doing something for specifically for screen printing. And screen printing, if any of you guys have ever done this before as well, has a bit of a peculiar setup that you need to do because it works in a particular way for actually printing the shirts or whatever it's printing. It's not just t-shirts. And so my usual kind of process would have been make the illustration in Photoshop, then bring it into Illustrator to live trace, and then do quite a little bit of fiddling in Illustrator to try and get the layers to work in a particular way that's going to work for a printer to set up the file, right? So it gets a little bit technical, but essentially jumping into Fresco kind of cuts all of that out. And we're able to work with vector, and everything is kind of like the setup is done as you're doing the file, which is super interesting to me and valuable to me. But also I think the kicker here is the reason, and we've covered this in a few streams as well, the reason I tended not to use Illustrator over Photoshop when kind of working like this is because the brushes in Photoshop were never really to my liking. The brushes in Illustrator were never really to my liking. I much preferred the control of pixel brushes in Photoshop.
Right.
That might just be my shortcoming. Maybe that's just me not necessarily knowing how to drive the machine properly. But Fresco's vector brushes, and we'll take a look at those in a sec, are like top tier, really, really good, allowing me to do anything I want. It really feels like drawing again, except it's all vector, which is like fantastic, absolutely awesome. So let's dive straight into this. I've got this sketch, obviously the usual kind of process. I'm going to kind of drop the opacity on that sketch, and I'm going to pop a new layer on top of that as well. It's already done that for me because I've made a mark. So just make a new layer. At the moment, you can kind of see, just looking at this right here, that it's just a kind of a random layer. So Fresco has kind of 3 different types of brushes. So maybe I guess they're like more like 2.5 different kinds of brushes, I guess. If I go into my brushes here, you can see it pops down to quite a few kind of options for me. And I've got pixel brushes, live brushes, and vector brushes. So pixel brushes are your traditional kind of pixel brushes that you would get in Photoshop. There's probably a wider array of brushes, but they're all kind of rasterized. They're not vector. So that's cool for drawing, and you can do a hell of a lot of drawing in Fresco as well. Like it works super well for any kind of sketching with some really cool brushes as well. Live brushes are your watercolor brushes, and I won't demo these all today because it's quite a lot to get through. But effectively, they're brushes that kind of remain live. Like it's like watercolor will remain wet forever. And if you add it, it will mix, and like you get some really, really cool digital effects.
Yeah.
But the one that we're looking at today is vector brushes, and vector brushes are the big game changer. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are using Fresco more and more to create illustrations, being that, 9 times out of 10 when I'm working with a client, they will require a vector file, regardless of whether it's screen printed or not, but they'll usually kind of ask for a vector file to be handed in at the end of the project, which makes sense, but kind of needed to be kind of catered for in my process and maybe added a few steps. So this really just kind of changes a lot for me. So I'm going to stick with my vector brushes, and in my vector brushes, I've got a bunch of different options as well. We've kind of spoken about this in the past as well, like in terms of like, super duper custom brushes. Like I got a brush for hair, and I got a brush for, rope, and I got a brush for whatever else. And it's just like, I think it's a little bit too much. I tend to just use like round brush, maybe with a soft edge, maybe with a hard edge, and just kind of tweak the settings of those brushes. And in here, it holds the same kind of value for me. Just this like standard round brush with a little bit of a kind of a tapered edge and obviously pressure sensitivity built in. So pay attention to this layer when I start to kind of put down a line here, and you'll see an icon immediately pop up on that layer. That tells me that that icon here is saying this is a vector layer because I'm using a vector brush. So let me undo that and swap that to something else just to kind of show you guys. If I'm using a pixel brush like this pencil brush, you'll see that when I do that, it changes to this kind of like checkerboard little tiny icon. And I've got a nice kind of smooth pencil brush that I can use. So it kind of acts accordingly, but it needs a layer to be a certain type according to your brush. So you can't have a layer, for instance, that has vector brushes and pixel brushes. They don't kind of work at the same time. They need to be on separate layers. But I'm going to be using just that standard brush, like I said. Here we go. Vector brushes, please. And just my round brush. And there we go. So I can then kind of start going into this and drawing with this. So you can see like there's quite a nice kind of line work to it. It feels, obviously it's got pressure sensitivity built in. So if I'm not pressing down very lightly, very hard, it kind of doesn't do a very thick line. But it's quite responsive, and I can get some really nice kind of tapered edges going. I can get lots of really nice things. It really feels like basically I'm not working in vectors. It feels like I'm working with a normal brush, which I love personally. It's something that's kind of kept me from working with vectors quite a while. And really kind of playing around with these brushes now, you get a really kind of nice feeling from them. And then obviously I can use the eraser tool to erase from this, right? So this really just behaves exactly like a custom brush. Now, in Fresco, you can't really see the anchor points and all those kinds of things yet. You could take this into Illustrator and then you would see all those anchor points. And it is creating a lot of anchor points when I'm doing this because it's using this as kind of like a brush. But in terms of the workflow, it really is just kind of working in that way. So I can just jump in between the eraser and the pen and just kind of start mocking this up a little bit. Now I've got my pen here, my iPad pen. I've got it set up so that when I double tap on the pencil, it swaps from the brush. If you look right here, it'll swap from the brush to the eraser when I double tap. That's just muscle memory for me. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. Obviously, you can just tap that with your left hand and kind of get that drawing in there. You can swap to the eraser tool and then swap back, or you can press and hold this little modifier ring that you can see here that I just kind of hold down. I can move it around the canvas, but it kind of stays there the whole time. So if I press and hold that, it swaps my brush to an eraser. Now this is really cool, and you won't necessarily see it too much here, but if I swap to, I'm going to make a new layer. If I swap this to a regular pixel brush, there we go, and go back into my pencil, right? So I've got this really like very textury pencil brush. If I use the eraser here, you'll see that it's like, it's too clean a line. It doesn't have the same texture as my pencil. So it's kind of tricky to use it in that way. But if I press and hold down that modifier, whoops, I'm on the eraser. If I press down and hold down on that modifier, it'll use the same brush, the paintbrush that I've used, but as an eraser. So it's a really nice way to do that. If you don't want to hold down that button all the time, you can just double tap it and you'll see the circle goes blue. That means that it's just kind of holding it as an eraser, and then you can just tap it again, double tap it again, and it will come back to that. So that's one of the kind of the cool features that I use with that modifier. That modifier does a lot of different things in a lot of different tools in Fresco.
Yeah, it's contextual, so right? Like
to,
depending on what you have selected, it'll behave in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, you know, just sort of various little shortcuts like, let me just delete this real quick. Shortcuts like this, right? So let's say I've got my layer here where my palette is. If I am a little bit lazy and I don't want to have to keep going back to this eyeball here to kind of hide that layer, if I hold that down, I can just double tap the layer and it'll hide it. But if I don't have that hold up, it won't kind of do anything. So the modifier does a lot of different things for you, and it's a really kind of nice tool to work with. So at this stage, it's just going to be me kind of going in and just kind of drawing this in. And I'm going to try and kind of get a fair amount of texture in here. We've got an illustration that's a little bit of like, it's like a zombie, it's Halloween-y, so it doesn't need to be too clean. But I'm also kind of trying to pay attention to basic kind of inking principles, which kind of hold up regardless of whatever program you're in. You're going to kind of want to use these in the same way, and that is the light's coming from here. So generally speaking, the underside of these kind of shapes, there's kind of like icing on there to kind of create these, will be a little bit darker on the further side away and a little bit lighter on the top side.
Yeah.
So I can get a little bit of kind of dimension already flowing with my kind of inking just even before I start adding any kind of shading in there.
Cool.
So that's really, really cool to use. Now, obviously, I'm doing this and trying to get something that's quite rough and it's got a fair bit of texture and is working in that way to kind of, yeah, it's like a gingerbread man, right? So, you know, we're going to have a lot of kind of little divots and bumps and things. He needs to look like he's made of cookie or kind of just bread. So I'm not going to be too worried about getting something that's really super clean. My tapered lines don't need to be super clean either. But again, same thing. If you wanted to get something really, really sharp, one of the really cool things that you could do here is you can actually kind of cut off intersections of this because this is all vector. So it's using a slightly different kind of formula to create the artwork. And so you can get some really sharp edges on things if you're kind of looking at this and you like the inside here is super sharp, but the outside, normally I'd have to come in, you know, with an eraser and kind of cut back on that. And it's a little bit laborious and like not the best way of doing this. But with vector brushes, what you can do is if I double tap this and then tap it again, the outer ring goes to blue. And that is my vector eraser tool. And you can see I'm literally just drawing a line. I don't know if you guys can see that kind of blue line that it's made there. Very, very faint.
It's very faint, but yeah, I can see it.
I'm literally just kind of cutting across those. And it gives me these super duper sharp edges, really super clean.
Wow.
And you can get some really nice kind of effects with this. But it's also a really nice way of like erasing something really quick. Like if you have done a whole segment of line, but you don't want to have to go in and paint it and erase it, you can literally just kind of scratch through your various strokes and it will treat them as kind of brushes in that way. So I think it's a really nice kind of addition to this to be able to kind of edit that accordingly. Now, one of the things that you need to kind of think of is if you've done this and then this and then that, right? So that's 3 strokes. If I do that, I won't be able to, it only does it per stroke, right? It only does it per line. So it won't do the whole line at once, which is a kind of a nice thing, but it is something that you need to kind of think about if you're looking at erasing these sorts of things and working in that way. So
it sort of works like the shape builder tool. Like it's reminding me a lot about that in Illustrator. Like it's how just the way that it behaves, or you know, seems to have sort of similar tech to like intertwine as well.
Yeah.
Like somehow the software is understanding kind of what the sequence that the shape has been built, and the positive and the negatives and where things overlap, and then allowing you to decide what you want to keep, what you want to intersect, like all that sort of stuff. That's cool. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that feature existed at all in Fresco.
It's really cool. Like it's such a nice feature, especially if you're working with something like, obviously this style that I'm working with is quite sort of rough. So I'm not too worried about getting super clean lines like this. But if you're trying to go for something that looks more like vector art, I suppose.
Yeah.
Then that's going to be really nice to work with in that way and kind of being able to kind of erase those in that way. is really cool. And you mentioned the shape builder tool actually as well, which is one of the other things. Again, I'm not necessarily going to use this too much on this particular illustration, but down here at the bottom, you've got this little circle. That's our drawing guide. So with the drawing guide, if I press and hold, I've got a bunch of different things. I've got a ruler, square, polygon. In this case, I've got a circle. And what that will allow me to do is basically, I've got this circle right here. I can move that circle, I think, somewhere else no. Sorry.
You're right.
I'm still trying to like mess around with this a little bit.
I'm going to move your head a little bit. Can you show the circle again? Because I had your camera over the top of it. You can see it now, stream, in case anybody was wondering.
Sorry, yeah.
No,
this is a bit of a new setup for me. I've got my cameras in weird kind of places and using my phone. So yeah, if ever you start seeing my hair or my head's out of the screen, let me know. The circle is just down here.
Cool. Yeah, everyone can see it now. There you go.
So yeah, so we can bring in a circle. There we go. It's giving me a bounding box. I can kind of move that around. And now with my paintbrush active, if I draw, you can see I'm kind of like pulling over here, but it's actually not. It's constraining this to the circle. So it's a really nice way of getting just like perfect shapes in Fresco like this. And obviously we've got squares and we've got a whole bunch of different things. One of the other things that Fresco will do is if you're kind of drawing a straight line and you just press and hold down, it'll snap that to a straight line. Same thing if you're kind of trying to draw an ellipse, and we all struggle with ellipses. If you just hold that down, it'll snap to a perfect ellipse for you along what you've kind of done with your drawing.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So there's a fair bit of kind of shape building options and tools that you can do with these. And then again, if I kind of overlap these, I can come back in with that tool and go like, I don't want that shape and I don't want that shape. So I've kind of used this exactly like what would happen in Illustrator, where you're kind of building two shapes and then cutting them out and then kind of building a third shape from that. So for instance, the little kind of moon up here, assuming I wanted that to be kind of perfect, which in this drawing, it's probably not going to be as relevant. But I could very easily just kind of go, all right, let me make a new layer, use my drawing assist tool, draw that moon, and then bring in another one. There we go. And then I can use my shape building tool to make just like a perfect crescent moon.
Yeah, cool.
So again, like this is not as much kind of like a drawing thing as we've been kind of talking about. But yeah, just sort of on that note of like the shape builder tool and kind of working with that, because this is a vector program, it allows you to do all those other things that vector would be used for as well. So it's like, it's a super kind of powerful combination of the two that I think is really kind of super versatile and really great to work with in that sense.
That's awesome.
And like Fresco is not new. Obviously, Fresco is not something that just came out recently, but definitely something that I have kind of started messing around with a little bit more.
Yeah.
And incorporating into my workflow, creating these kind of illustrations as we go along. So this at this stage would just be me kind of like working on this for a while. So let me jump ahead a little bit and show you guys.
And Alessandra, I just wanted to say, I hope you enjoyed Max. They were at the community expert and helped in the Fresco booth. So that's perfect that you're here at this stream. Let us know if that was your first Max or not. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, it was super interesting. We were talking about it a little bit yesterday. We like really kind of blown away by some of the features that were in there.
Yeah, we had our watch party and sat down and absorbed a lot of it, which was really cool. Lots of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so cool. So this is my finished line work.
Yeah.
that I obviously prepared earlier. So this is just like kind of like whole drawing. It's still got that very much like a like, you know, traditional drawing feel. It looks like it was made by hand a little bit. It's not too clean and perfect.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of kind of sketchy marks happening in here. Um, in terms of what this would look like if I brought it into Illustrator, there would be just like a bajillion layers in here and so many different like artifacts and objects everywhere. It'd be an absolute nightmare. But that doesn't really matter because we can kind of work on this in here and just kind of edit it a little bit later on. But one of the really nice things about this is if I kind of go in here, let me just release this as a reference layer. And I'm going to pop a new layer underneath that. So the same kind of principle applies where we're going to be working with layers underneath our inking layer. Now, I'm working with a limited color palette of 4 colors, which is kind of part of the brief that we kind of set for this. And one of the reasons being is, or the main reason for that is screen printing. They will need to make a screen per color. So every color costs a significant amount to kind of create a screen for. And so usually when you see kind of like a t-shirt or a print that's been screen printed, there will be limited amount of colors. It's not that it's impossible to do something with like 35 colors. It would just be ridiculously expensive to set that up. So usually screen printing tends to just be a limited range of colors. But there are ways that you can kind of cheat this and like create separate colors. So halftones, which we've kind of spoken about quite a few times on the stream, are a good like cheat to get like a half tone, which is what its name implies, of like if you want to go from like a gradient from black to white, you just create a halftone and you get the illusion of a gray and you get this kind of like a gradient. So halftones are a good way to do that. But also you've got this thing, and a lot of people will do this when printing on different t-shirts, is use the color of your t-shirt as a cheat color.
Right.
And so in this instance, I want this to be printed onto a black t-shirt. It fits with the kind of the horror theme of this, but it also means that I can keep all this artwork in there that I've created with my inks without adding a 5th color, because black would have to be a color, right? So I got the purple, the yellow, the green, and the red. They're my 4 colors, and I want to stick to that. Or in this instance, let's say the client has specified we don't want to go to the 5th color because it's going to cost more to print the t-shirts. So we want to limit it at that. So I can actually create this in a way that will mean that anything that's black will just be no artwork and the t-shirt color will show up. And traditionally what that would have implied in Illustrator is a lot of like fiddling and mucking around. But with some of the options in Fresco, you can do that pretty much from the onset and in the way that you're working. So one of the main things I need to do is I need to click on this layer and set this layer as a reference layer, which is right here. And I click on that, set as a reference layer. And what this now means is that it's going to use the line work that I've created in here. Let me just hide my sketch so we can kind of see the artwork a little bit more cleanly. It's going to use this black as a framework. It's kind of like a stamp, if you will, or like a stencil, right? So when I come in onto my layer here, I'm going to start with like, maybe I'm going to fill this in with one of my colors. So let's go up here, press and hold. It's going to eyedrop my color. And I want this gingerbread man to be red. So I can start painting. But one of the things that you'll notice is if I hide that, that stroke is intact. Now that doesn't make a whole lot of sense just yet, but you don't want to be painting on this. You want to be using the paint bucket. So the paint bucket here, when I click, it's going to pop up this option. Do you want to fill with pixels, vector, or did you press the wrong button and you just want to cancel? In this instance, we absolutely want to be filling with vector. And it's going to fill that whole area for me insofar as it sees kind of like a closed area, right? So it's like your general kind of paint bucket.
Yep.
And it's kind of seeing where everything lies. But the really nice thing about this is it's actually kind of doing a knockout. So it's not putting any of the red where all those kind of black bits were that I had in my artwork, right? So let's continue with that. I'm going to fill this in. And now I'm just kind of clicking in these areas and I can kind of start filling this in really, really, really quickly. And I don't want those to be filled, but I do want these ones to be filled. So because my line work is kind of sketchy, I'd have a lot of like just making sure all of these are nice and filled, and that's going to be a little bit of a pain. But for the purpose of this stream, we'll kind of leave it as such.
Yeah.
And actually, I also didn't want the eye to be filled here, so I'm going to double click on that. And you can see, obviously, it's leaving everything blocked out. But now, if I go back to my paintbrush, double click, and then click again, I can actually delete this area. Oops, sorry. Let's make sure I'm on the right layer. There we go. What I've done is I've kind of taken out that red area in the eye because I didn't want it to be filled. So what I'm going to try and do here is work in a way that's going to be smart later on for me in terms of the process that I'm creating. And every layer, every color is its own layer and only has that color on that layer. So all the red will remain on the same layer. Everything that's not red will be on different layer and so on and so forth. So that is the way that the screen printer will separate these, because they'll need to make a screen or like a stencil with all the red, and then a stencil with all the green, and then a stencil with all the blue. So if you are able to separate those on different kind of layers, you'll be good to go. And Fresco kind of allows you to do that in a really nice and managed way. So we're just going to kind of continue filling all of this up, making sure that we're sort of relatively clean with what we've done. It doesn't need to be perfect again for the purposes of this brief. But yeah, so we've got our kind
I can't get the Shrek thing out of my head.
And kind of color. Sorry?
I can't get the Shrek scene out of my head.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, definitely.
Especially
When
because
I
he's a
started drawing
monster.
This, I was like, this seems familiar.
Yeah.
Where have I seen this before?
Yeah,
And then that's
monster.
why he's called Gingy, because yeah, like the giant like gingerbread man
Nice.
kind of thing. And some of the sketches that I had originally are showing that as well, right? Where we had like this kind of like giant gingerbread man stomping
totally
across the city, like yeah.
Awesome.
So that is definitely like something that has kind of guided this particular brief for sure. All right, so let's pop back into here, and then I would make a new layer again. We're going to make all the green areas now, so just tap on that and hold and go back to my brush, and then it's going to say, yep, cool, paint bucket, make all these kind of green, and so on and so forth. All right. So you want to be careful, because here you'll see I wasn't very accurate in how I tapped on this. If I tap in here, I'm all good. But if I somehow tap on the line work, watch what's going to happen is it's going to fill all of the areas that are black, because the reference doesn't just work with the white areas of the black drawing that I've done. It also works with the positive space, the black areas. So now it's just kind of filled all that line work as well. So we don't want that to happen. So just be careful when you're kind of doing this, and make sure that you just zoom in on those little kind of like bits and pieces that are kind of be left over everywhere. If you kind of misclick and click on the line work, you'll get something kind of a little bit different happening in your line work. So cool. So all right, let's jump ahead again and delete all of this.
There's a quick question in chat. Is this all done in vectors?
This is all vector. At the moment, this 100%, all of it is completely vector artwork, except for my sketch layer, which is a pixel layer, but I'm not going to be using my sketch layer later on. Right. So it doesn't really matter. But as far as the colors are concerned, this is all completely vector. And one of the cool things, again, I keep mentioning is this, right? So if I hide this black drawing that I have, I will kind of see this weird thing happen. But if I come in and make my t-shirt black, you'll see that that's not a problem. I've basically added this cheap color in there with the black of the t-shirt that allows me to kind of have that work to that. So basically, what's really kind of smart, and it's one of my kind of favorite things about the way that this kind of brush and reference layer business works, is it's basically knocking out all of those colors from the black artwork.
Right.
Because what you don't want to have is, obviously, if this is going to be like this, if you sent this like this to the printer, they're just going to print black on the black t-shirt, which is basically a waste of a color. You're still going to have to pay for that that extra screen and that extra color,
when
but
screen
it won't
printing,
really make any difference.
We should disqualify as well. This is specifically for screen printing, not like
That's
CMYK
correct.
or
Yeah,
RGB printing.
absolutely.
Just in case there's people that weren't here when you were talking about it before.
Yeah. So again, if I wasn't doing screen printing, I wouldn't really necessarily worry about doing this much, and I would mix all my colors on the separate layer. If you mess it up and you kind of forget to do that, or if you find that you've got a particular color on something, like, so for instance, if you look at my my red layer, if like there's only red on there, but if I'd messed up and kind of, misclicked on my layers and kind of put a little bit of yellow on that layer, obviously that yellow needs to jump out of there onto its own layer with the rest of its yellow colors, so that the screen printer can kind of accurately make that screen, right? But if you mess that up, you can always just kind of fix that later in post in Illustrator anyways. But yeah, not having to do that here is a kind of a nice thing to have. But the next thing I wanted to kind of show you guys is, obviously, when I start kind of looking at this on a black t-shirt, that's all kind of cool, but I've lost a lot of, whoops. What's happened here?
While Jeremy's figuring this out as well, for those who've just joined us, if you have any questions as we're going along, we've got a bit more time left today, so just throw them in chat, like Anthony did there, asking about vectors. If you've got any questions at all about illustration, digital drawing, Fresco, feel free, throw it in chat.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, so if I show this black layer, the Christmas tree and the bats all kind of disappear. So I want to kind of be able to kind of show these again,
right,
without kind of creating this cheat layer. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to kind of hack the system a little bit. And I'm going to go back into this, and I'm going to create a little bit of artwork on my reference layer. All right, I'm just going to create, like, let's say, not like that, like this. Just going to make a little bit of a rough kind of outline around the entire artwork that I can then kind of use a little bit. All right, so let's do it over here as well, and add in a kind of another one just here. Then I can come in again, because I've got this set as a reference layer. I can come in on another layer. Oops. I'm going to get my purple. There we go. And I'm going to fill on that layer with the paint bucket in vector. I'm going to fill these areas like this. All right. Then I can go back onto my drawing layer, and I can double tap again, and I can just get rid of very quickly all of that line work in there.
Yeah, right.
And what that's done is, now I've created a shape around that allows me to kind of see the black outline. But let's dive back into this. Let's hide my black layer, and that's the test of whether this is working or not. All my artwork is still just fine. It's showing exactly how I wanted it, but without the black extra color. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 colors. I've got all of the detail, but effectively this black that you're seeing is just whatever the color of the t-shirt is going to be, right? So if
Yeah.
the t-shirt was like, I don't know, let's say another color, let's go with like a dark blue.
It's like nothing will be printed on that.
It would just be like that.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Oops.
Except the tree and the bats and stuff.
Yeah. You know why that's happened?
No.
Because
I don't.
I have this black layer is still set as a reference layer. And so what's happened there, if you're doing this and you're like, why is it not doing what I'm doing it? When I painted in with the paint bucket with my blue, if you look at this little icon here, you can still see there's a little bit of black inside of it.
Right.
Because it's still using the reference layer of that. All right. So I need to go out of there, undo that, go into my layer, and then say release reference. Now, when I go back into here and hit the paint bucket, it's still not doing it. Because I haven't hidden my layer. Sorry, a little bit of a process, but
right.
We got there in the end. So now you can see basically whatever color I make this will be changing according to the color of whatever it's on. So that is not a color. The black outline is see-through. It's just empty pixels.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get some really cool things depending on the t-shirt. But like I said, normally you just kind of want to do this onto a black t-shirt and work in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong printing on a black t-shirt. My whole wardrobe is black t-shirt.
You can't. It's always just kind of like screen printing on a black t-shirt does some really, really nice kind of results. And you can see that like one of the advantages of this is, like I said, like normally I would have to take this, like I would do this in Photoshop, and then I would take it in Live Trace it. But Live Trace always tends to kind of like tweak your artwork a little bit. It's never really perfect. It's come a long way for sure. And if you know kind of what the options are, you can get it to be pretty close. But it's never going to get this like super sharp kind of corners and things that you can get in Fresco. So you always lose something in the translation when you take something into Live Trace, which has always been a little bit of a frustrating thing for me. I've always had to work at like massive resolutions in Photoshop to try and alleviate how much that file gets changed when you go into a Live Trace.
Yeah.
Which obviously kind of slows the process down. This just cuts all of that out, and it's really like super fantastic. Like when I started sort of working with this, I was like, oh man, this is a real game changer for me. This has been out for a long time. I'm not the first person to kind of talk about this. But I just wanted to kind of frame it in that context of specifically for screen printing. This is basically ready to go to a screen printer with all of these layers, and you could just delete that black layer and send this as is into Illustrator, right? So the next phase that we need to the next thing that we would need to do, and this is the final step, is go over to our share button up here and say open a copy. And you can send this to Illustrator for iPad, or you can send this to your desktop computer. And that will then open as is with all of your, your anchor points and everything ready to go in Illustrator. And then you can send that AI vector file or EPS over to a screen printing shop, and they would be like, yep, thank you, we got the file ready to go, no changes.
EPS? Would you send an EPS? Do you send an EPS over to the printer?
Sometimes people ask for EPS.
Gosh, it's been a long time since I've sent an EPS file.
It usually isn't the case, but yeah, the options are there if you wanted to. But yeah, effectively, this is now going to be an AI file from Illustrator if you do this last kind of step and take it from here into that kind of thing. And it will open up all your layers. It will keep everything as it is, impeccable. And yep, basically just ready to go. So cool. That's our kind of t-shirt all done up and ready to roll in Fresco.
That's awesome. It was really cool. Anthony in chat was saying, I use layer masks to give my icons textures in the background, definitely experimenting with reference layers after this stream. And I think Dark Hours as well said, are we ever going to use layer masks again? Yeah, it's quite interesting. Like obviously we will layer masks aren't going anywhere anytime soon, but it is super interesting. Like you know, you do so much of your work in Photoshop, just the different way of building something, and like there's always a tool for a purpose. Like it's quite interesting discovering a new app or discovering a new process, or like as we said when we were watching Adobe Max, I know we've talked about it a lot, but you see something and you just think, oh, okay, so if I can do that, maybe I might approach doing an artwork in a slightly different way, or maybe I might, you know, maybe because you can do this thing at the end, you might start somewhere different. And I think we discovered that a little bit with Firefly boards as well. It's a bit of a storyboarding tool, but also it's a way that's plugged into kind of some of the AI features if you want to use those. But it's also a collaborative kind of whiteboard at the same time. Like I've done that with lots of clients. Everything's always remote, and I've just had a whiteboard kind of, you know, free app that I've used just to ideate and storyboard, and kind of often it's like name generation or, you know, things like that. We're looking at names and domains and things like that, trademarks, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's very interesting, I think, like how it can inform our day-to-day creation just by discovering how a tool behaves.
Yeah, and what it can do, and like maybe it can be a bridge in between something that you weren't able to be doing before. It's like
Right.
it'll be like the duct tape that holds the microphone exactly in the place that you wanted to, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm loving this. It's almost to the point where I was like, oh man, I wish that you could have Fresco for desktop, because I'd
Right.
love to also be able to use this with my Wacom as well. And just being able to kind of go, you know, big screen and all that. But there's a lot of gestures in here using the Apple Pencil. As you guys saw, I'm kind of swapping between brushes and pens and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that make sense to have this on the iPad. But yeah, I'm only just kind of starting to scratch the surface a little bit of kind of these options in Fresco, and I'm looking forward to diving deeper and kind of seeing what else it can do for my process and how that will change the way that I work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. Well, I think that might take us to time for today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's that time of year, I think, to experiment, you know, with new tools and new things. Like it's kind of definitely have that in the air at the moment of what am I going to do next year, and where am I going to dedicate my time? What tools do I want to learn? What did I say I was going to do in January 2025 that I didn't do come February? It's just that it's that kind of year, isn't it? But I'm loving this. I'm loving this for you. I'm loving you discovering this sort of thing. And sometimes it does take like quite a few years for something to mature as well. Like I'm a bit like that with Express. Like I find I use Adobe Express for certain things and it's amazing at it. But it probably wasn't that at launch. Like it's matured as an app. You know, I'm sure that Fresco has had updates over the years to get it to the stage where it's, you know, something that is potentially useful for one of your workflows or for something in the future, or, you know, obviously, you know, it has that value for that, you know, for the features that it does have. And I love working in vector artwork too. Like there's something really nice about just the scalability and those crisp lines that you were showing and those crisp kind of cuts. And of course you can put type in here and all sorts of stuff, which if we had some more time, we could touch on. But hey, Tony in chat saying, great, I learned some cool stuff. Good. I'm glad.
Awesome.
I'm glad those that watched, you know, hopefully you got something out of it. This is always lots of fun to do streams with Jeremy. He's a master at digital design, so it's always fun. I hope you guys get something out of it, whether you're watching live or watching on demand. I'm going to shut up. Jeremy, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This might be our last stream of the year.
Definitely. Yeah. We've done quite a few this year. It's been fun. I always super enjoy doing these streams as well, especially when we get kind of comments, people saying that they've learned something. But it's just like, that's really awesome. So yeah, keep the questions coming, keep the streams going. I'll be continuing to work in Fresco. So new me 2026, all vector guy.
Jeremy Vector Lord. Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for everything this year. But this isn't the last stream. We've got a couple more before we'll round everything out before Christmas. But if we don't see you all again, have a wonderful rest of the year. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time on Adobe Live Asia Pacific. Bye.
See ya.